Rishi Sunak has batted away calls to sack his Home Secretary after she made unauthorised claims attacking the Metropolitan Police for its handling of pro-Palestinian protests. Downing Street confirmed it had not cleared Suella Braverman's article in the Times today, in which she accused the force of playing favourites and applying a double standard to its policing of protests. Braverman now faces a range of sanctions, from a public apology to a full-on sacking, but many are saying the Home Secretary may actually be on a mission to get herself fired. Joining me in the studio now, Politico journalist Dan Bloom, good to see you, and Sunday Times columnist and former Downing Street staffer Charlotte Ivers. Hi there. We're also joined down the line by former Culture Secretary David Mellor. Why don't we start with you, David? Thank you for joining me. What is Priti Patel... I'm sorry, goodness me, Suella Braverman. Because I've just been watching Priti Patel on the COVID inquiry. What is Suella Braverman playing at here? Is she playing? Is she trying to manipulate the Prime Minister into firing her? And if she is, why is she?
Well, I mean, I can answer many of the great questions that trouble us all about the theory of life and, about how big is the universe and all that, but I can't answer that one. I don't know what she's playing at. What I do know is that this makes the government look in a total mess. I was a Home Office Minister for 5 years. If the relationship between the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary did not work, the government looked all at sea on a whole range of issues, because it should be a very intimate relationship, as it was, say, between William Whitelaw all those years ago and Margaret Thatcher. And I just think that for the government to look as though it's really all over the place on an important issue relating to the security of the realm, security of the public, it's very difficult to know. I mean, it seems to me that it's quite clear that there has to be a good reason to ban a march. And it seems to me that that reason isn't necessarily there if the timings are quite different, and if the issue is going to be properly handled, and that those people who are going to be demonstrating in an appropriate fashion. It seems to me the difference between the timing of the of what's happening at the cenotaph and all of this is sufficient that it should be possible to draw a clear line between them. And what the Home Secretary has to, what the Commissioner of Metropolitan Police has to determine is this the right, is there a way of respecting freedom to protest and not disturbing the peace and quiet of an appropriate celebration, commemoration of the deaths of so many millions of people in the war. This is all very unfortunate, but I'm really quite distressed that the Prime Minister and Suella Braverman can't sit down together and actually agree this in 5 or 10 minutes. The fact they can't suggests that Miss Braverman is on manoeuvres. And, a Home Secretary should have more important things to do than advance her own cause in this provocative way.
Thank you, David. Let's bring Dan Bloom into this. So Suella Braverman has written a piece in the Times, you might say, I think many would say, deliberately provocative. It's a piece criticising the police just before this march goes ahead, because it looks as if it's going to on Saturday, on Armistice Day. What is her purpose, do you think? I mean, David Mellor says, he can solve many great existential questions like why were we born, do we exist, and did the chicken preempt the egg or not? But he really cannot be seen to look, or even attempt to look, inside Suella Braverman's mind. Can you? What's she trying to do?
I wouldn't presume to be able to look inside her mind. If I could, I'd probably be in a more highfalutin job. But I think what she's trying to do is draw clear water between her views and the government's views.
Why?
And of course, her team would not say that. Well, because in the views of MPs, some of her MPs, she wants to stand for the leadership if there is a vacancy next year if the election goes badly. Now, of course, her team deny that, and they say that she is just getting on with the job. But the thing here is that she stood for the leadership, or tried to, last year. So we got a view of what her views are, such as, leaving the European Convention on Human Rights and that kind of thing, which could come up next week if the Supreme Court on Wednesday rules that we cannot send, people who are wanting to claim asylum to Rwanda. So she would say that she's just taking a principled stand on these things. The problem is when you are in the government, it's very difficult to do that without creating friction with Number 10 because of the principle of collective responsibility and all the rest of it. I think it's a bit more nuanced than is she trying to get sacked. I think it's more about is she trying to preserve her kind of her distinct views and not be kind of swallowed up by the government view, and whether that comes to a head, as some MPs who admittedly have been quite critical of her for a long time, quite a lot of them, so this is not a new thing for some MPs, whether that leads to a point where either she resigns or she's sacked, then that could be a consequence of it.
Charlotte Ivers, Dan has just talked about friction between the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary. So did David Mellor. But one of the issues here, presumably, is now tremendous friction between the Home Secretary and the police. And we've got a form on this from Theresa May, and it wasn't a good look for her, was it?
No, that's true. And politicians do have the capacity to criticise the police, to suggest directions. The police are operationally independent, so it does come down to them how they police this march at the end of the day. And I think what we really are seeing here is Suella Braverman very much not playing by the rules on various different fronts. In particular, you do have the fact that it seems to be the case that Downing Street either didn't sign off what was written by her in the Times, or they made corrections and they were ignored. Either way, they don't seem wholly happy with what it is she's saying. And that is a problem. The government have to sing from a united hymn sheet, particularly on an issue as controversial as this one.
But she's often, David Mellor, isn't she? She's often outspoken in ways that people might consider to be deliberately provocative. She gave that speech, where was she, in Washington, a kind of inflammatory, incendiary speech that seemed to be all under a great deal of momentum of her own. Nobody was entirely sure, well, lots of us weren't, what she was doing there in the first place, why she was saying it, what she hoped to achieve by it. But what are your thoughts on the march itself, and what are your thoughts on whether it should go ahead or not, or whether it might simply cause a great deal of discomfiture to Jewish Londoners and beyond, and might end up in some kind of hideous, violent altercation?
Well, it would be much better if we were allowed as a nation to commemorate the millions of people who died in world wars, and could do that without anything else intruding. But we don't live in that kind of society now. You've only got to look at some of the demonstrations and you suddenly realize that a lot of people, they may wave British passports around, but they don't necessarily think in a way that that would be a traditional British view of the significance of Remembrance Sunday. Now, what I think, where the government is once again being shown up, is the lack of weight of the judgments that are coming through from either the Prime Minister or from his Home Secretary. Suella Braverman seems to see being Home Secretary as just a bigger soapbox from which she can shout whatever message she wants. And one of those messages is, hang on a minute, I am Suella and I'm a far superior form of life to the Prime Minister. As for the Prime Minister, he cannot appear to be as credible as he would want to appear if he cannot control even a leading member of his government. And I think that I don't know what these people think they're battling for. At the moment, the battle seems to be about who's going to be leader of the opposition, because I look with some despair at this government, and they don't appear to know that the public want to be reassured that the people who are at the top of the tree know what they're doing and can make balanced judgments speedily and collectively, Not much evidence of that at the moment, I'm afraid.
Oh, Dan Bloom, should the march go ahead on Saturday?
Well, I'm a reporter. It's not my job to adjudicate on whether things should go ahead or not. But I think how the march goes will be pretty instrumental in what we're talking about, the sort of ructions in the Conservative Party, because, you know, there are two scenarios. Well, there are multiple scenarios, but there are two main ones. Either the march goes ahead and, as the organisers are saying, it goes nowhere near the cenotaph. It's in the afternoon, not the morning, and, you know, there's no disruption. And Suella Braverman is sort of proven wrong, in a sense. It wasn't, you know, a huge kerfuffle. Or she's proven right, that some either, you know, large numbers of marchers or fringe element kind of disrupt remembrance services, be it in London or be it elsewhere. And she's able to stand up and say, I told you, no, I tried to stop this going ahead, and I was right. And that will lend kind of momentum or otherwise to the problems that are going on in the party at the moment.
Charlotte, we're being told that on various other channels, Sky notably, what's being broadcast at the moment is it's not a case of if Suella Braverman goes, but when. In other words, it looks as if, to them at any rate, her sacking is imminent. Does that sound convincing to you?
Certainly all day there have been rumours of a reshuffle coming out of Downing Street. These things are always kept under wraps until they're not, but we are getting some indication that that is likely to come soon. I would say as well, it is very notable that Downing Street today have remained very tight-lipped on Suella Braverman's future. They have sought to distance themselves somewhat from her comments in the Times. And as we mentioned earlier, she has, it seems, broken the ministerial code.
But what do you make of David Mellor having just said, yeah, what does she want to be? Leader of the opposition? Why would she want to be that?
Well, I think Suella Braverman finds herself not quite on the same politics as Rishi Sunak. She knows that there are many on the right of her party who feel the same way, and she knows that there will be at some point a vacancy. And I think that is exactly what we're seeing here. We are seeing posturing and an attempt to stake herself out as the voice of the party's right for whatever the future might hold.
David Mellor, final question. Suella Braverman's comments on tents and those who sleep in them, tents as a lifestyle choice. I did have one of the chief representatives of one of the homelessness charities on the programme, obviously the very next day, to respond. And I said, you know, is it a lifestyle choice? There definitely are some people who sleep rough who want to. But if they didn't, or if they chose to go to hostels or other accommodation, does it exist for them to go to? He said it definitely doesn't. There is just not enough accommodation. They don't have, many of them, the option, he said, and he works for a homelessness charity, of going elsewhere. It's not a lifestyle choice. And he also said that lots of the tents are given out by local councils. The government actually pays for them rather than leave people just sleeping under the stars or under the rain. So I just wondered what you thought of that particular utterance of the Home Secretary's.
Well, she does seem to sort of lead with her chin, doesn't she? There's not much evidence of deep... You see, when I first became a minister, my Secretary of State said to me, always try and remember what the next supplementary question is going to be. In other words, don't just think how brilliant I can answer that question. You've got to think, what road am I opening up for further cross-examination? And can I deal with, in a credible way, with the first, second or third supplementary questions? I've never had the impression with Suella Braverman that she thinks like that. I think she is a creature of the moment. I think she doesn't really consider this is a game of chess, and you've got to, you know, 3 moves down the game. Are you putting yourself in an impossible position? And I think she's put herself in an impossible position. Does she want to put herself in an impossible position? They are saying, a lot of people are saying, well, she does. But what was the benefit of that? I mean, the Conservative Party is about to be... I lived through 1997. I lost my seat in 1997, when the Conservatives lost more than half of the parliamentary party. She can't really want to wish that on the party now, because once you start losing, I mean, literally hundreds of seats, certainly a couple of hundred seats, getting back is a game that takes a whole lot of years. She'll have plenty of time to regret all of this, But if you say to me, what's she really trying to do? I think she thinks that she can become the top dog. And of course, the reason she thinks she can become the top dog is that Sunak does not have any authority to stamp on this. Rishi Sunak is, I'm sure, a very nice man, kind to animals, helps old ladies across roads, all that sort of thing. But plainly, he is not a leader and he's not a tough person. And that is where, if the Conservatives are not careful, they will be swept from office.
Thank you very much indeed, all of you. Thanks for coming in.